Happy midnight, everyone. The moon is shining, so I hope all of you are smiling. Welcome to Professor Moonshine's Redstone 101. This is episode 12, I believe. And in today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at all the various kinds of rails and their effects on minecarts. Now, this might be a bit of a long episode just because there's a lot to cover. However, all the rails are pretty simple, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. And without further ado, let's head on over to the Redstone lab and get started. There are four kinds of rails in Minecraft. There's the regular rail, the powered rail, the activator rail, and the detector rail. We're going to be going over all of them, starting with the regular rail. This right here is a regular minecart rail. It has very few of its own features, but one of those is that it's the only rail that can make turns like so. So if you need a minecart to go around a corner, the only way to do that is with a regular minecart rail. And regular rails really only have two interactions with redstone, the first of which being that if a regular rail receives redstone power, it will change directions. So if I were to put a lever here and flick it, you can see that this redstone changed from going on this right track to the left one. And if we unpower the rail, it goes back to how it originally was. Another feature related to this is that rails always have a directional preference. So for example, take this T-junction where this rail has the option to turn left or right. No matter how we place this rail, it is always going to choose to make this connection right here. That is because rails by default prefer to make south to east connections. So if I press F3 right now, you can see I am facing south and this over here is facing east. And that's why when we place this rail, it prefers to make this connection right here. Now there's tons of laws about rail directional preferences that I'm just not going to get into because they're relatively complicated. All you guys need to know is that when rails are at a junction, there is a preferred connection that they always like to make. But since powering a rail changes the direction it turns, you can always make a rail turn the way you want it and override its directional preference. Now, the second main way that rails interact with redstone is that when a rail changes directions, this is an event that is detectable by an observer. So let's say we have an observer, it's looking at this rail right here, and we can just set up a little circuit that will cause the rail to change directions. Now, if we were to flick this lever, the rail has now changed directions, and you saw that when that happened, the observer was able to detect it and emit a signal. And as far as redstone is concerned, that's really all there is to it to the regular rail. You can use a redstone signal to redirect the rail, and when you do so, that is an event that an observer can detect. Let's then move on to the powered rail. This right here is a powered rail, and it has basically two functions for minecarts. It will either speed them up or slow them down depending on its own powered state. So if a powered rail is unpowered, like this one is right here, and a minecart goes over it, it will actually stop the minecart. When I was first learning redstone, I completely overlooked this ability, but it's actually just as useful to be able to stop a minecart as it is to make a minecart go. So don't forget that powered rails can also stop minecarts in addition to speeding them up. Now you can power a powered rail in a multitude of ways. Basically, any sort of adjacent power source like a redstone torch will power the rail, or if you run a redstone signal into the powered rail directly, this will also power it. Additionally, if the block that it is standing on becomes powered, this will also power the powered rail. So basically, all that to say, any adjacent power source will turn on the powered rail, and it can also be turned on if the block that it's on becomes powered. When a powered rail is actually powered, like this one is here, it will glow with that sort of redstone-y glow, and when this is the case, it will speed up minecarts that pass over it. And you can see in action here, this rail is currently unpowered, so it's going to stop the minecart when the minecart lands on it. But if we were to power it, then it will actually speed up the minecart. Now, you do not have to power each individual powered rail. Any powered rail that's connected to one that is powered will itself become powered up to 8 blocks away. So this is 8 minecart tracks right here. If we lay another one, now this one is unpowered, and you would need another power source to continue the signal. Now, similar to a regular rail changing directions, a powered rail switching from being on and off is detectable by an observer. So we could have an observer looking at this powered rail and giving an output, and if the rail becomes powered, we can see that's an update, or unpowered is also an update. And a fun fact is that you can use powered rails to relay a signal faster and more lag efficient than if it was with redstone dust. So if we were to flick this lever right here, you can see that the redstone lamp at the end lights up immediately. That's why you might see some redstone pros using powered rails in their builds, even though they're not using minecarts at all. It can just be a faster and more lag-free way of transmitting a signal. Lastly, if you have a powered rail that's directly next to a full solid block like this right here, then a minecart on top of that rail will push off in this direction when the rail becomes powered, like so. But like I said, this only works if this block is a full solid block. So you can see if I were to replace it with glass, like so, now if we try, the minecart is not going to go anywhere. And surprisingly, this includes redstone blocks themselves. So this redstone block is what's powering the line currently, but you can see that the minecart won't actually go anywhere. It has to be a full solid block in order for the minecart to be moved. That's all for the powered rail. Let's go ahead and move on to the detector rail. This right here is a detector rail, and it's pretty much just a pressure plate for minecarts. In fact, there's a stone pressure plate in its crafting recipe. But you can see here, if we were to send a minecart over the top of it, it will become activated for as long as the minecart is on top of the rail. Now, when a detector rail becomes powered, you can take the output either from the rail itself or the block it's on top of. So I could illustrate that here. We could have a redstone dust line coming directly out of the detector rail, or we could have a redstone dust line that's coming out of the block that the detector rail is on top of. And when we send a minecart through here, you can see that both of the lines become powered. Again, because the detector rail powers adjacent components, and it also powers the block that it's on. Now, by default, no matter what kind of minecart is on top of the detector rail, it's always going to power adjacent redstone with a power level of 15. You can see over here, I'm looking at the redstone, and it has a power level of 15. If, however, we were to take a comparator output from the detector rail, we would be able to measure the fullness of chest minecarts and hopper minecarts. So now you can see that this redstone isn't lit at all, and that's because this hopper minecart is empty. If we start filling it up with items, though, like so, now this comparator is giving an output proportional to this minecart's fullness. But remember, this is only when we use a comparator and only when the comparator is taking the output from the detector rail itself. And the comparator can take this output through one block as it can with most other outputs. So that's the detector rail. Let's move on finally to the activator rail. This right here is an activator rail, and when it's unpowered, it functions just like a normal rail, except that it can't make turns like the normal rail can. But otherwise, it wouldn't interfere at all with a regular minecart passing over it. If, however, the activator rail is powered by some sort of redstone power source, then it has a variety of functions. For example, if we have an entity in a minecart like this creeper here, then a powered activator rail will dismount that entity from the minecart. Now, just a quick fun fact about this feature is that the activator rail has a preferred sequence of checking where to eject a creature, so you can determine exactly where the activator rail is going to dump a creature, and this is actually a useful mechanic in a lot of mob farms. The next thing that a powered activator rail will do is actually to lock a hopper minecart. So if we run this hopper minecart over that activator rail, this hopper is now locked. And it is locked indefinitely until we decide to unlock it again. So if I were to throw some stone here, you can see that this hopper minecart didn't pick it up at all. Now, if we want to unlock this hopper minecart again, we have to drive it over an unpowered activator rail. So now if we send this hopper minecart back to the other side, it just got unlocked and it can now pick up items again. So to lock a hopper minecart, drive it over a powered activator rail, and to unlock a locked hopper minecart, drive it over an unpowered activator rail. Now, why are we way out here? Well, because the last function of a powered activator rail is in priming TNT minecarts for explosion. So if we were to send a TNT minecart over the activator rail, it got lit, and, well, you know what happens next. And that's going to conclude all the new information from today's lesson. I know it was a lot, but that's why we're going to review it right now. First, we looked at the basic minecart rail. It's the only rail capable of making turns, and you can change the direction it turns by giving it a redstone signal. Next up is the powered rail. The powered rail is useful for either accelerating or decelerating minecarts. If the powered rail is on via a redstone signal, then it will make any minecarts going over it faster. But if it's unpowered, then it will actually slow down or even stop those same minecarts. Third is the detector rail, which acts like a pressure plate but for minecarts. Any minecart that goes over a detector rail will cause it to emit a redstone signal of 15. If, however, you use a comparator to take the output from the detector rail, you can detect the fullness of container-like minecarts such as chest minecarts and hopper minecarts. Lastly is the activator rail, which can either be powered or unpowered. When it's unpowered, it acts for the most part exactly like a regular rail, except that it cannot make turns. And when it's powered, it has a variety of functions, including locking hopper minecarts that go over it, priming TNT, or ejecting any entities that might be in a regular minecart. Lastly, if you have locked a hopper minecart using an activator rail, in order to unlock it, all you need to do is drive it over an unpowered activator rail. Hopefully all that makes sense and I've explained myself well. Now we're going to move on to a quiz to test your knowledge of what you've just learned. Let's start with problem number 1. Imagine you are working in your base and you're really trying to get this minecart track to take a left here. Try as you might, no matter how you place this rail, it does not seem to want to connect the way you want it to. What's one way we could get the rail to turn the way you would like it to go? I'll give you guys a moment to think about your answer, and as always, you can pause the video if you feel like you need more time. Got your answer? I kind of spoiled it by having a lever in my hotbar, but the answer is that you could power the rail or the block that the rail is on to get it to change into this direction. Recall that powering a rail that's at a crossroads will cause it to change directions and change which rails it connects to. Hopefully that one was pretty easy. Let's move on to problem number 2. Here we have problem number 2. My question for you is, if I place a minecart on this powered rail and press the button, where is the minecart going to end up? As always, you guys can take a minute to consider the circuit and feel free to pause the video if you need more time. Got your answer? Alright, let's see what happens. I'll press the button. Now, if you said that the minecart was going to stop on the middle powered rail, you're correct. And if you said otherwise, don't worry about it. We'll go over why that is right now. This golden rail in the middle is currently unpowered, meaning that it's going to slow down any minecart that passes over it. However, on the right-hand side, we have a detector rail. Detector rails emit a signal when a minecart drives over them, so once the minecart drives over it, it's actually going to power this rail right next to it, allowing the minecart to go all the way to the end and start coming back. But there's no detector rail on this side of the track, meaning that the powered rail remains unpowered on the minecart's return journey. And that's why it stopped in the middle. We can see it in action one more time. As it goes over the detector rail, it powers this rail, but that doesn't happen when it's coming back. This might be a useful mechanic in making a one-way rail system. Anyway, let's move on to problem number 3. Here we have problem number 3. We have a minecart rail that is running from left to right, and on top of both of the blue wool blocks, I have a powered activator rail. I'm going to place a hopper minecart on this rail right here. It's going to drive under all of these chests, which are full of their respective items, and it's going to end up on this powered rail at the end. My question for you guys is, which of these items are going to end up in the hopper minecart? Or in other words, out of which of these chests is the hopper minecart going to actually take things? I'll of course give you guys a moment to look at the circuit, and feel free to pause the video if you feel like you need more time. Got your answer? Alright, let's go ahead and place down the minecart. It just ran under all of the chests, and now let's take a look inside. As you guys can see, the hopper minecart was completely empty, so if you guessed that that was going to be the answer, then congratulations and well done. If not, no worries, we'll go over why that is. So recall that a powered activator rail will lock any hopper minecart that runs over it. So as soon as the hopper minecart runs over this activator rail that's powered, it becomes locked and unable to pick up items. In order for the hopper minecart to become unlocked again, it has to drive over an unpowered activator rail, not a powered one. You guys might have thought that as soon as it ran over this, it would become unlocked and pick up these two items. And I do applaud your intuition if you did say that. However, it would need to pass over an unpowered activator rail. So if I were to depower that activator rail and run the experiment again, now you can see that it picked up some of the andesite and some of the diamonds. But since when we ran the experiment, this activator rail was powered, the hopper minecart actually never became unlocked after it ran over this first activator rail, so it didn't pick up any items at all. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the end of today's video. I really do hope you guys enjoyed, and hopefully you guys learned some stuff about the various kinds of rails in Minecraft. If you have any rail-related questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'd be happy to answer as many as I can. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a marvelous rest of your day, and as always, shine on, little stars, shine on.